But thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want to introduce our panelists for you. To my right is Ben Abbott. He is an ecologist at Brigham Young University and also the executive director of Grow the Flow. Thank you. We also have Brenna Williams, who is a resident here in Box Elder County and also the lead sponsor of the citizens referendum aimed at halting the Stratos Project here in the county. Rhonda Lauritsen is on the board of Mineral Resources International, a family business that operates here in Box Elder County and has operated here for decades. Piper Christian is an air quality and climate policy associate at Stewardship Utah. Thank you for joining us. And Rob Davies is a professor of physics at Utah State University. So this evening, I'm just going to ask a question to each one of the panelists to get us started. And then we want to make sure that you guys have plenty of time to ask your questions and even make your comments. We'll use this as a public comment forum as well. So I will go ahead and get started with Ben. Ben, you have gone on the record and said that you are not categorically opposed to all data centers, but that this one is a different beast. Why is that? And can you help us understand how water might be tied up in different aspects of this project and how that could affect the Great Salt Lake?
Thank you, Addison. And thanks to all of you for being here. I understand that the high school graduation is tonight. And so thank you for being here. You know, okay, does that sound better? So generally, people overestimate how much data centers are currently affecting us. So in the watershed today, much less than 1% of our water consumption comes from data centers. So when I've been contacted in the past about a new data center, usually I've run the numbers and say, oh, it's pretty small, it's not going to have a big impact. This project is what they call a hyperscaler, and it's so enormous that the water use for cooling and then also the water produced to generate power for the project could be very substantial. And I say could be because we don't have the data, right? This is a data center with no data currently. And so I can't, of course, right now say here that the project is going to use 100,000 acre feet or 200,000 acre feet, but it could. You know, that's a lot of water. And we're already facing a water shortage. If we're looking at Great Salt Lake is shrinking, right? That's decreasing the amount of snow and rain that we're getting in the valley. We can't afford to have a new water use that's consuming water. And then the other piece of this that has been really concerning to me is not about the data center at all, but about government process, right? For us to make that. Utah is facing many threats and many decisions right now. And we need the Utah way to actually work. The Utah way is not sit down and shut up, right? You showed up too late. You can't make a comment. The Utah way is that we show up and that everybody brings their own perspective. And I was just talking with Darren before we started. I think that this project is actually going to have a really positive impact on our community. Not because of the data, but because of how it's brought people together. And when this kind of thing happens, when we participate in government, we have already seen many of our elected officials flip around, right? 180 degrees. They are responding to your emails, to your phone calls, to your posts online. It has changed the dynamic. So we have a chance to really influence the outcome on this project.
Thank you, Ben. And if that works better, we'll go ahead and have all the panelists stand as they're speaking. So Brenna, you are the lead sponsor of this citizens referendum here in the county. What was it that worried you most about this project when you first heard about it? And what made you want to get involved in this way?
I knew I was going to get involved with the night of the vote. I knew before we came in that how it was going to come out. And so I immediately said I was going to referendum this. That night I went home and got on the computer, and a lot of other people felt the same way. So we went to the clerk's office the next day and got the paperwork, and there was born. That's Box Elder Accountability Referendum. Well, what? I have 5 concerns. Well, I had 15 when I wrote the letter to the commissioners, but they can kind of be summed up with, like he was saying, the accountability, lack of process, transparency, there has been none. Secondly, I was concerned about air and water issues, which we all are really aware of with the bird refuge and with the way our lifestyles are. I mean, we have a governor who's saying we're in an environmental drought and we're in a state of emergency, and then they're turning around and doing something like this. I think they're diametrically opposed to each other, so you can't have it both ways. I'm concerned about the tax capture too. Why are we giving these guys so many concessions? They say they want to go to, if we don't want them, they'll go to Mississippi. Mississippi's not going to give them these concessions. So I don't know why we did. I'm concerned about lifestyle. What are we giving up if this project actually comes ahead and comes in? We've got 65,000 people here, and they're talking about bringing 10,000 more in. And we're already struggling with property taxes and our infrastructure. That's a major concern. So those are kind of the basics of why I was concerned about the project.
Thank you, Brenna. And actually, Brenna came down to Salt Lake City 2 weeks ago for a similar forum to educate us city slickers on what's going on up here. And she personally invited us to come up here for this. So thank you for the invitation as well. So Rhonda, the project developers of this project say that it's not going to use very much water, but there's also been efforts to acquire water rights and buy up water rights, including from a ranch that neighbors your property in the county. What do you make of those water rights change applications, and how do you see the legalities of water moving forward in this project?
Thank you. So, yeah, my family owns property clear out in the middle of, out on the north end of the lake. And it just so happens to be right between Locomotive Springs, which is currently down 80%, and the salt wells. And it will border, it borders the Bar H Ranch and is right there by the proposed data center. We're not calling it the data center, we're calling it the proposed data center. So a little backstory. We have seen this crisis with the lake much sooner than other people did. Our land used to be a beach. We used to camp there, we used to swim there. A week ago, Saturday, my brother and I were talking about the calls we're getting from the media, and he said, "You're going to hate this, but would you be willing to get out that old home movie of you bobbing in the lake right at Monument Rock?" And today, if you want to reach the water, start hiking, because you will be walking 4.5 miles to reach the water. Okay? And this isn't recent. This crisis has been coming a long time. We've seen the water recede when it was a beach in the 90s pretty much every year. It doesn't matter if we've had a good water year. The trend has pretty much always been out farther and farther and farther until we're at 4.5 miles. So we have several concerns. We've filed protests, like many of you, thousands of protests filed. And our protests covered 4 main areas. The first is quantity impairment, meaning that if more water is being used out of the system than is currently being used, that's going to reduce the amount of water for everyone. And as we've talked about, we all know, right? You don't need me to talk about how water is an issue with quantity. The second issue that not a lot of people are talking about is quality. What are they going to do to the water they take, right? So they're taking water, they're saying if it's a closed loop system, it should theoretically put water back into the system, but in what state? What chemicals might be put back into that water? What other we just don't know, right? And we've heard and been reading some scary stories in other places about water contamination. And that's not just, people might think the Great Salt Lake doesn't matter. It matters to my family. We use minerals from the Great Salt Lake specifically for human consumption. Okay, so that's going into people's bodies. But it also, that water is feeding us through the aquifers, the cattle. You know, that's also something else. So there's the quality issue that we all should be concerned about. And then there's the diversion of the water, moving it from its place of origin somewhere else and changing its use from agricultural use to industrial use. And this is an agricultural community. And that agriculture, it's not like the water isn't benefiting the climate, the environment, and all of us. When you drive out there, you see the cattle. It's rangeland, and those cattle perform an important function on the range. They do what the bison used to do. So it's important that we don't take away our local food like security and divert all of that water to industrial use. So there's the diversion, there's moving it. And then the final question for us is this issue of the consolidation of the applications. So there was the initial application for 1,900 acre feet of water. That's a lot of water. That's millions of gallons of water per year that would be coming out of the salt wells, diverting it miles away, using it, and then doing who knows what with it. So this final issue, though, they withdrew that initial application, said they would be back with more applications. So now they're back with another application, which is much, much smaller. But it begs the question, how many will there be? It's a system that is already under extreme pressure. The margin of error we had in the water system out there, that was gone 10 years. Is the plan, right? We don't know. We don't know what the plan is. And the question is, do they know? Not sure they do. Or are they just intentionally withholding that information? Maybe. Kind of seems like a little of both.
Thank you, Rhonda. So, Piper, the project developers say that they're going to tap into the Ruby pipeline, which is a natural gas pipeline that runs near the project site. A MIDA official has said that the entire 9 gigawatt project would eventually be powered by natural gas. The governor has since said, no, that's not true. Only the first phase of it would be, and that the Stratos Project would have to adhere to, strict.
Hi, is this working? Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everyone. And just again, my name is Piper. I'm the Air Quality Policy Associate at Stewardship, Utah. I actually grew up right over the hill in Cache Valley. My mom used to live in Brigham City, and I remember seeing the Ruby pipeline as driving through Sardine Canyon. So it was interesting to see this connection. So to answer your question, I think that the environmental concerns that are persisting are legitimate. Now, it is true that our state does have a process for applying for air quality permits as well as water permits. But, and so there will be opportunities for the public to be able to weigh in through public comment and other things. But whether it's 1 gigawatt of energy generated through natural gas generation or 9 gigawatts, that is still an enormous amount of pollution that is being added into your county. And I think that should be legitimate cause for concern. And another thing that's important, while there are limits on emissions, often the ways that those permits are changed are simply saying, you can still pollute here, but the way that you pollute needs to be a little bit different. You need to install this control technology. You need to offset your emissions in XYZ way. But I think from my understanding, having been in this forum only a few weeks ago, a lot of
how you came to that conclusion.
Right. Well, thank you. I told everyone I needed a chalkboard and we were going to have to do some differential equations, but Einstein has a quote that everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. So I'm going to try to make this as short as possible, but not shorter, which is why I'm going to read from a script. I'm going to try to walk you through this as clearly as I can. But my process was this. 3 weeks ago, or maybe 4 weeks ago, a student of mine sent me an email asking about this project, saying, have you heard of this, and can you tell me a little bit more? It seems like it's really big. And I hadn't heard of it. And so I looked it up, and I have to say I was essentially gobsmacked by the scale of what they were talking about, a 40,000 acre complex and a 9 gigawatt data center. I'm going to come back to that in just a second, but let me just walk you through then the actual temperature calculations. So I estimated this is a huge amount of heat being dumped into the environment. So I wanted to estimate, and this was the first thing that jumped at me is, wow, what is that going to do to the local temperatures? And I do have a background in atmospheric physics for anyone interested, nerds in the audience. So I came at this from a couple of different ways in physics. One of them, again, for the nerds, is called a radiative approach. Another one is called a convective advective approach. They use different physics. And the reason you want to do this is because, you know, if you get kind of converging answers from different directions, you start to have confidence that what you're doing is roughly right. And I'm doing essentially a back of the envelope calculation, a little bit better. And so these methods did give me essentially the same answer, not identical. They're estimates, and what really needs to happen is a full model. But the conclusion is this: dumping 18 gigawatts of, and I'm going to come back to that number in a moment, of continuous waste heat into one confined valley will measurably raise local temperatures across the Hansel Valley and the surrounding area. During the day, fairly modestly, 3 or 4 or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, though, quite a much more significant effect, something like 10 or 12 degrees Fahrenheit across an entire valley. And this is important because that valley in a desert depends on the daily condensation cycle. At nighttime, things cool down. The ground cools off very quickly, radiatively, to produce an inversion of the atmosphere, and that traps heat down low that you emit down near the valley surface. So a 10 or 12 degree Fahrenheit rise will essentially suppress, certainly has the likelihood of suppressing the daily condensation cycle, all that dew and frost that forms. And in this environment, this is a major source of moisture for the things that live in that valley. So this is really transformational, especially if you imagine it happening throughout the entire valley. And because it's a valley and the air is trapped, and we have experience with that here in Utah, we know that that's what happens. So this is a constant, massive heat source that never shuts off, doing that to the valley, not just for a day or a week or a year, but for decades on end, as proposed. So the governor called my analysis deeply flawed. I'll be honest with you, though, no one has showed me a flaw. I've had conversations with quite a few people and emails, scientists asking me for my calculations. I've conferred with my colleagues here in the state who do this kind of work. We all seem to think that this analysis is pretty solid. So that said, if the governor, and I mean this seriously, not sarcastically, if he has an analysis that reaches a different conclusion, I'm genuinely happy to see it. I'm always willing to be educated, but I have not. When I read his comments closely, though, Addison, about water and temperature, it did seem like he was lumping Stratos into this category of just general, typical data centers. And I need to be clear, my analysis is about the Stratos Project, and this project is most definitely not typical, as Ben alluded to just a moment ago. So perhaps the governor, literally, seriously, not sarcastically, is making an honest mistake here. And if he is, it's a mistake a lot of us are grappling with, which is just the sheer scale of this project. So I want to talk a moment about the scale. So most common data centers in the country are a few million watts. We call that megawatts. Some of what they call big data centers are a few tens of millions of watts. The biggest data centers out there currently, what they call hyperscale, are a couple of 100 million watts. So this is megawatts. The Stratos Project is 9 billion watts, and that's just the data center. If you throw in the power plant, we're talking 16 to 18 billion watts. That makes this project about 3,000 times larger than the average data center. And so when you're dealing with that kind of a scale, it is easy to kind of get your intuition mixed up, and perhaps that's what happened. I've not seen anything that suggests my analysis is flawed. When you're off by that much, this doesn't work well. It's kind of like trying to compare a campfire to a forest fire. And you don't think of them the same way. You certainly don't model them the same way. And you certainly don't expect a forest fire's effects to even remotely compare to a campfire's. And that's the challenge here. That's why this thermal effect is so much bigger than a normal data center. This would be one of the largest single point heat sources on the entire planet if it were built. I've used some analogies. The ones that seem to gain the most interest is 23 atomic bombs worth of energy being deposited in the Hansel Valley every single day for decades upon end. And if you think that should have an effect, your intuition is confirmed. That will have an effect. So back on the notion of a flawed analysis, I'll actually concede that definitely my analysis is flawed. It's a back of the envelope calculation. It's kind of a fairly sophisticated back of the envelope calculation, but that's it. The point here is, as was said, clearly for a project of this scale, what we need is an actual, full, independent, whole systems analysis before you decide to move forward. And that is what absolutely has not been done. Almost through it. Almost through, I promise. I would say that one of the great things about Utah at our universities and throughout our tech sector, we have amazing experts here in Utah. Piper, I'm sure, works with a lot of them. Ben certainly does. And they are available for our legislators and for our elected officials to sit down with and actually start to look at a full comprehensive analysis if they're looking for independent voices to do so. I want to take just one more minute and open up tonight just a little bit more what's been missing from the whole conversation. And that is, we've been sort of, in this particular case, and in the case I've just given to you, arguing about a single number, like how many degrees will it warm the valley during the day and during the night. And that's, I would say, a symptom of the problem, as has been alluded to. We're doing arithmetic, and it's important arithmetic, but what we need to do is pattern recognition. And the pattern we've fallen into is to look at each project that comes along in the Great Salt Lake Basin and in Utah as a whole, one at a time, and ask what is what economists would call the marginal harm, the specific air pollution harm you would get from this project, the specific water harm, the specific, in this case, thermal harm, ecological harm, human well-being harm, human health. What we need to ask is not just what is the harm, the damage of a particular project, but say a whole systems analysis of the whole basin and say how much damage can it actually absorb? How much damage has it absorbed? Is there any capacity left to absorb more damage? And I think many would argue in the case of the Great Salt Lake Basin, no. But if there is more capacity, is this the kind of thing we want to use it for? And you can apply that kind of a whole systems analysis, not just to this data center, because let's face it, even if this data center goes away, another one comes along. Another project, another data center, another supercenter, another demand on the system. And then if we want to even be more bolder, we could ask a better question still, not how much more damage can the system absorb, but how much repair does it need from us? We've spent a lot of time talking about how much can we take from the Great Salt Lake. And now maybe it's time for us to start asking, what does it need? So the governor has said we take too much time in this country. We can't get things done fast enough. And I'll say, look, I want us to get things done too, but we've gotten an awful lot done in exactly the kind of thinking over the past decades that he's promoting. And we can argue it's what's brought us to where we are now, which is a Great Lake basin in an advanced stage of ecological and hydrological collapse. As I said, Einstein once said everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. For a project this size, I would say, with consequences this large, not just for us, but for generations coming, I'll offer a version of, yes, let's do this as quickly as, let's move our society along in the ways that we decide we need to as quickly as we can, but not as quickly as, but not quicker. Understanding what's at stake here and really understanding it is worth the time it takes. And that's not delay, that's diligence. On a decision this big in a place this fragile, diligence is the least thing we owe to the people, of course, that are going to inherit this in the coming decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Before we turn it over to audience questions, I just wanted to ask one more question to Brenna. A lot of people have been pouring in with comments online about, how can we get involved? There's a lot of questions about this referendum right now, whether or not it will move forward, how it will move forward. Can you talk to people a little bit about, how they can get involved and what you're trying to accomplish with this referendum?
We just happen to have a table over here. If anybody wants to volunteer, you can go scan the QR code and sign up to come help us in any way that you possibly can. There's a spot for everybody, depending on what you want to do and what your skills are. We'll try to find a place for you. Right now, we're just in the waiting stage. Thursday, we should get an answer, and we'll know whether we're going out and gathering signatures next week or if we're going to be involved in a lawsuit next week. So we're just kind of waiting to hear which way that goes. Well,
Thank you. So if you guys are okay sharing that microphone, I'm just going to kind of wander the audience with this microphone and take some audience questions. If you want to direct your question specifically to one of the panelists, please just let them know in your question. Otherwise, we're just going to share the mic up here. So raise your hands.
Thank you. And thanks to all the panelists in organizing this. I'm super encouraged by what was mentioned, how this is bringing so many people together in ways that we don't always see. And that relates to my question. I've spoken with lots of different people in the county. I have roots in the county. I live and work nearby. And I've just seen a wide array of people with different interests and different motives, different concerns. And you guys pointed out so many of them. But my question is, for locals and those in the region, how can we effectively continue to come together to work to advocate around our concerns and our demands to make sure this is a thorough, well thought out process to where we come to the best conclusions that honor, the needs that are being proposed, but most importantly, the people in this region and the state of Utah. Thanks for any comments from anybody on the panel.
Let's see if this, maybe not. Pull it out. One thing that has really occurred to me is when you organize online, it's really easy to feel angry toward other people. When you come together like this, you see each other's humanity, right? We're all facing this threat together, as Brenna, you have said. And so we really need to create real relationships and connections with each other, right? That's how we're going to make sure that when the next issue comes, they can't divide us and pit us against each other. This is our home, and it's our responsibility to care for it, not to allow it to be harmed, but to replenish it, right, for all future generations. So I think we need to keep organizing like this, participate in the work that Bear is doing, not just to have online discussions. Has anybody ever had an online discussion where somebody at the end is like, you changed my mind? Like that has never happened in the history of the world. On the other hand, when we come together, right, in a public forum like this, at church, at work, at the grocery store, that's where we realize we share so much in common, right? We are all Utahns. whether we're new, we've only been here a few generations, or whether we've been here thousands of generations. This is our home, right? So I really think we've got to move beyond the digital world and get back to reality where we're organizing in person.
Okay, so I have a question about, so we have the referendum here in Box Elder that we're working on, but if we want to be able to protect the state from these types of actions and actually do the work that needs to be done to ensure that we protect our environment and our people, what can we do? What's the most effective way statewide to hold our elected officials accountable for pushing these data centers?
One of the things that we can do, but the easiest thing we can all do, is make sure we go out and vote. Make sure we know what the positions are that different candidates have. And if we have questions, make sure we're in their face asking them. The other thing we can do, and this is down the road, the soonest it could get on the ballot would be 2030 or 2028, an initiative so that we can get moratoriums like states like Ohio have gotten, where they have moratoriums against things like data centers. Because right now, a lot of the regulations are getting bypassed with organizations like SITLAW and MIDA, and there's a lot of impact studies that don't need to be done, and a lot of things that they can get by with, like they can't be sued for contamination. Well, guess what's going to happen with the data center? So those are things that are really important that we understand, and that possibly looking at initiatives to get on the ballot is another way we can go statewide.
Did anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Yeah. Go ahead, Rhonda.
We can also not give up hope. So I'm not super proud of this, but the night of the vote, I wasn't here because I was home on my couch in tears. Just, it felt like grief. And I did not have a lot of hope in that moment. And there were other people who stood up and said, there's a possibility we can do something about this. And people have come together, and this is what hope looks like.
So there's a ton of questions in my mind and a lot of comments in my mind, because ever since I first heard about it, and the first thing I saw was Dr. Taylor's article being interviewed, and I called you. I'm Kathy Ransky, live right here in Tremont, and nice to meet you. And one comment, and there's a couple comments. First and foremost, apparently they were supposed to have gotten approval from all the neighbors who were on board with this, and apparently you're not on board with this. Nobody talked to you, did they? Okay. The other question I have, and this is more for the physicists in the room. So this is not just affecting Box Elder County. This affects the entire Wasatch Front, because we've got toxic dust in the air already they're measuring. And when we're talking about the heat that's going to be generated from this, what would be the speed of evaporation off the lake? Is that something you can calculate to see just how much more water we're going to lose from evaporative processes?
Well, great question. And the short answer is to how much we're going to lose is more. Yes, absolutely. This kind of thing can be modeled. It's a little more complicated than what I've done. What I've done is to basically say what this is a giant 400-acre, that's the hundreds of acres of giant industrial scale fans trying to cool hot radiators with hot air. That's if they use dry air cooling, which has been strongly applied, but again, we don't know because this is a data center without data. I'm going to steal that. I love that. Yes, this kind of modeling can be done, and frankly, I think to Rhonda's point, should have been done. I haven't done it, but yes, these kinds of calculations is when you raise, the short answer is when you raise air temperature a little, evaporation increases a lot. There's an equation called the Clausius-Clapeyron equation, again for the nerds in the audience, but it can be used, but you have to model the airflow and what's going to be happening, and that can all be done. There are people who know how to do that. I'm not a person who's done that, but we can do it.
You know, I just wanted to respond to the earlier question and Rob's point. So he gets criticized for doing this analysis. Whose responsibility is it to do this analysis? Right? I mean, why is it a volunteer professor at Utah State, right? We need to put the burden of proof on the developers. If they want to change our community, they have to prove that it doesn't harm groundwater, that it doesn't harm the wildlife. But Brenna, you've talked about that it doesn't harm the livestock that live there, especially the people that live here. That is simple due diligence. And so we need answers to all of these questions. The only way we're going to get them is if we build the political power, right? And so that's why the most important thing you can do, connect with Bear, right? When the most important thing we can do as individuals is not act individually. We've got to act together so we can get answers to all of these questions. Because as you said, there are hundreds, thousands of questions that we need clear, rigorous answers to. Yeah, sorry.
And how wonderful this is all going to be and all bells and whistles. Nobody has discussed the construction phase of this and how is that going to suck up water, contribute to pollution and all the rest of that. The other question I have on a science standpoint is the decibel levels of all the frequencies that are going to come out of that thing, because I've been doing a lot of research on data centers and reading and learning as much as I can. In fact, Denmark, kudos to Denmark, they've put a year hold on data centers to find out what's going on, how they can do it better before they go and build anymore. The question I have is, okay, so we don't know what they're going to use as far as construction and what kind of mess they're going to make in construction. The other thing is the decibel levels, especially the frequencies that we cannot hear, but do affect us, and how far would that travel, and what would that do to the birds being able to migrate where they're supposed to migrate, because they don't know from data centers and maps. They fly the way they always flow, but what does that sound and frequency and vibration going to do to their migration pattern?
Yeah. And so those are such good questions. I'll just say briefly, has anybody seen the new renders of what the project would look like? The comment this morning or on the way up here was, it looks like a public library, right? It's just beautiful. There's glass. It's welcoming people in. And that's fine, right? The developers always try to make it look pretty, but it's a good sign that they're starting to care about what people think, right? And this is a part of, we're building political power. So it may be that a lot, MIDA has the authority to push this thing through, but they're not going to do that if they're all going to get voted out because of it. And that's why we should be practical. We should be fact-based. I do want to say, making threats to individuals is out of bounds, right? If we disagree with the county commissioners, if we disagree with the MIDA board, we do not attack them, right? A foundational principle of our country is that we collaborate peacefully, right? That is how we're going to do this. And so as we engage, I understand that it can be really, it can make you feel emotional. It can make you feel grief. We need to take that upper path, and treat them with dignity and respect. It makes us harder to ignore, right? When we act based in sound science and from our values, right? Loving one another, caring for one another, we will be absolutely unstoppable, and we'll be able to make sure we have a good outcome.
Short answer on the noise, it's a very legitimate concern. It's hard to convey the scale of what we're talking about. Hundreds of acres of industrial scale fans, where even much smaller projects have been built with such systems. Noise is an issue at all frequencies, as you bring up. Yet again, this is why we need an actual, real analysis to tell us what's happening.
Hi, so my name is Zach, and I, like everyone, I have a lot of questions, and I trying to pick just one. But I know people who know the county commissioners, just building on what we've talked about, not coming together, having respect, not threatening people, those things. The people that I know who know the county commissioners, conversations I've had have kind of implied that the commissioners were put in a position where even if they voted no, it would have still gone through. So that's kind of my question, and you probably might not be able to answer, but does MIDA have the authority? Could they have pushed it through? And were the commissioners put in a position where they were told it's coming no matter what, and you either get on board and we give you a hand on the steering wheel, or you say no and you don't have any say whatsoever?
Yes. First, I think level set with what a bind to put the county in for this framing of you either get a deal that you have virtually no input on or not be involved in the process whatsoever. And I just want to express, just how frustrating that is. And so to speak to that, I think we have looked into the statute around this, and in state statute for MIDA, if they are operating on property that is within a county, unzoned county land, they have to have authorization by the county commissioner via a resolution. So for those who were here a few weeks ago, that is what that resolution did. It gave them that land use authority. And that is 40,000 acres of the 41,200 acres that the project area consists of is on that unzoned county land. So if we're able to say no and file a referendum on that decision, that removes that authority. So I think that's why there's so much excitement around the important work that the Box Elder Accountability Referendum is doing, is that this really is a pathway to say, let's put this decision up to Box Elder County residents through a robust process where we can assess, what is going on here, and then have residents decide if this is the right fit for the county. But I want to defer to the referendum.
Did you have anything to add to that, Brenna? Sorry, I thought you had a comment on that.
As far as whether they have to honor agreements, everybody needs to go look up State Code 63H and memorize it, because they don't have to honor a thing that they said they're going to do. Once the project was turned over to MIDA, it's MIDA's project.
What was the number?
63H.
Hi, I'm a Box Elder resident, and my work experience is in data management. I've been studying data stuff for a long time, seeing what the trends have been. And the other big aspect of my work is to train non-native digital non-natives or older people on on technology. And it's very rewarding work. So I love what everybody's doing right now to learn and to increase their knowledge about the goings on of these industries. And I really appreciate the panel that's been assembled up here. This is a good representational group for us to learn from. So I'm not trying to throw anything under the bus, because I am absolutely in the lane of the referendum and how we're going to take as much action as we can to stand in the way of this as possible. But I just would like to hear from each of the panelists, because what has been proposed would be two consulting groups, two committees that would come together with people participating from the community, supposedly. And I can't remember exactly how they'll be chosen down the road. And of course it could change, but That being said, if community members have to or get to participate in committees that help kind of provide transparency with the project if it goes forward, I would like to hear from you guys what kind of person or what community role or what expertise would you hope would be on that committee, especially if this was like in your backyard.
Thanks for that question. The first thing that I'd say is we actually need the data scientists who can evaluate if this project even would accomplish its stated goals. So there's been the claim that we need these kinds of hyperscale data centers to combat China. And if you look at what China has done, they've actually overbuilt their AI capacity. So over 60%, these are all estimates because you can't get good data out of the CCP, but these are, you can get protesters out of the CCP, but not good data, right? Over 60% of their server capacity in China is currently sitting unused. So they just went willy-nilly, they built a bunch of these data centers all around. And so my first question about this project is, does it actually accomplish its stated goals? And so we need the data scientists who can say, yeah, this is really going to help with innovation, with national security, with all of these other things. Otherwise, we could end up with a huge stranded asset. So that's one type of data or expertise I'd want on that panel.
I'm really conflicted about the question because I have my doubts about whether any citizen panel will be listened to on this. So my first foray into MIDA and was with the Inland Port Authority. And because there's an inland port that was proposed near the wetlands where I live in Weber County. And what we saw with that is that there just is a pattern of completely running over a citizen process. Starting with Salt Lake County, the inland port just completely steamrolled Salt Lake County, and MIDA is like a supercharged inland port. So I'm sad to say it, but I'm not sure any panel would make much difference.
I think to a similar end, they're having looked at the interlocal agreement that the county commissioners signed on to. While there are, some roles where the community can provide input, it's important to see who has the final say. And what is clear from reviewing that document is MIDA gets the final say on these things. So I think it's important to remember that. But nevertheless, finding ways for the county to weigh in is important, but I think it is important to clarify who really has authority in this area now. They operate as their own municipal body now with that resolution signing that off, which is why the referendum is so important.
So this is actually the first I'd heard of the committees, but I think what this is yet another opportunity for us to widen our view and the conversation. This particular project, Ben, as you mentioned, has kind of been a lightning rod. It's really interesting that it has ignited this interest and then kind of opens up the wider discussion, which is how do we find ourselves in this place to begin with a Great Salt Lake Basin in collapse and with a real failure of governance. So what I actually do in my day job at the university is what we'll call complex systems, whole system science, civilizational futures, looking at the interactions between human and earth systems and all complex systems. And what this is showing us is that we've got a real fault in the system, the way that we've gotten ourselves to where this is. On the notion of a committee, I want to broaden that. There's something that's been called citizens' assemblies that have been tried in a number of places around the world, even in the United States, that are designed to tackle sort of particularly troublesome questions in a society that even the government is having trouble getting agreement on. And the key to the citizens' assembly is being assembled on a particular question. A great example is in France on the question of end-of-life care and euthanasia and that sort of a thing. is you assemble a committee of people that is representative of the population. So gender-wise, economic-wise, racial-wise, all of it, all the things you can think of. And these committees can be, 40, 50, 60 people. And they study something for a year or something, and they're given resources to do that, and then they come back with recommendations. But the key to that is people have real confidence in those recommendations. These are people that have just been plucked out of life, kind of like jury duty, And I won't go any further into that, but I think it's a chance to broaden this question and say, if a citizens committee now isn't going to do us any good, if we find ourselves in a place where this unelected committee called MIDA has this kind of power, then we really need to be thinking about how do we get ourselves into this place to begin with, because even if Stratos goes away, there's the next one and the next one and the next one. And Rhonda, I thought your comment was very poignant that your family has seen this coming for many, many years. And now we can see what comes of that. And so looking at the structural changes we need to make in this kind of governance, I think is one of the most important things that can come out of this.
So, wow, this is loud. So one of the questions was related to voting. And of course, elected officials have to do with this. But I think we're kind of talking around the issue, and that I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room, which is that MIDA board members received $250,000. Stuart Adams specifically received $250,000 from multiple MIDA developers, MIDA associated developers, and then Cox received $50,000, and then even more from energy companies who profit off of MIDA board projects. Cox appoints 5 people to that board, and those include mostly developers. So my question is, how do we handle the, I'm not going to say corruption, but corruption? How do we deal with that? And how do we deal with MIDA projects that aren't even associated with the military? Like there's a luxury hotel they built in Deer Valley. How does that have anything to do with military?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We are the ultimate check, right? Government doesn't check itself. And the way that our system is created is we have to be involved. And if I could levy a criticism, myself included, we pay way too much attention with what happens in Washington, D.C., and way too little attention with what happens in Salt Lake City. So we had an invitation tonight to memorize a line of code from the Utah Code. We should be familiar with that. We should know who to call. And that's part of what we're trying to do at Grow the Flow, not just with this data center, but with water management generally, right? Let's get engaged civically. I was a Boy Scout growing up, and I got the civic engagement merit badge, right? We had to do that. But a lot of us haven't had that training. How do you get involved? But really, we need to be those watchdogs. They don't watch themselves.
The other thing we need to do is make sure that organizations like MIDA or SITLAW, which is involved in another data center down south, don't exist, because they're nice little ways to do favors to people who do favors for them. So that's what happens when you appoint everybody.
Hi, my name's Kelly Ma. I live in Plain City in western Weber County. It's right up on the border of Box Elder. It's on the house. I live in the house I grew up in. It's 40 acres. That's what's left of what my family settled there when, the Mormons came here and Brigham Young sent them to live on a salt flat. But anyway, just like Rhonda said, I've watched the Great Salt Lake shrink my entire life. I still walk my dogs out on the rail trail out there that when I was a kid, it was an actual a railroad, but now it's a trail you walk people on. And that's where I duck hunt and stuff growing up as a kid. And the lake is shrunk. I can walk all the way out to Harold Crane, 7 miles, and there used to be water out there. And there's just not, and there's the funniest part about it is there's around our land, there's a new development going in that just got halted last week, and there's nothing out there but mosquitoes and cows. And they got halted because they realized it was on FEMA land, right? And now they got to find some way to, I don't know, buy off MIDA and pay that through to get the houses they want. But I guess my question, I mean, I wanted to ask a lot of the questions that have already been asked, and you guys have answered the questions, is get involved politically. My question is, which one of you, or, you know, Ben, what are you running for governor or what?
I just want to say that you're not a plant. We've never met before. So.
Right. And also, I'm wearing my Utah hat. I'm wearing the purplest shirt I could find to support Box Elder County. I got a Plain City pickleball T-shirt on. Also, I mean, the lobbyist that they hired to come out here is my first cousin.
Yeah.
Literally, he's my first cousin. So Casey, tell your boss Kevin I didn't get shipped in. And if they're hiring, I'm willing to. I'm for hire.
Yeah. No, thank you. And there really is the next step isn't just to vote, but it's to run for office, right? And so this also gets back to the respect issue. If we only say negative things about government, nobody wants to work there. Right? I actually think we need to rehabilitate our relationship with government. And I have been really encouraged. So my state senator is Kevin Stratton. And he's gotten caught up in this and gotten a lot of flack because he helped pass the law, HB 60, that changed the water approval. And I understand if any of you come to the conclusion and say, Kevin Stratton was a part of a conspiracy to push this through. But I met with him 10 days ago. That was because, yeah, and that's really hard. If your politicians are not meeting with you, call us at Grow the Flow, and we will organize a meeting like this. And guess what? They show up when they know that there are hundreds of votes at stake. They really do. But it can be hard. Getting back to that idea of don't act as an individual, right? Plug in. We don't have all the answers at Grow the Flow, but we are trying to act as that hub, right? So people can connect. So with Kevin Stratton, he passed a law. It ended up not having the outcome that he wanted. I actually take him at his word. He did not know anything about this project. But when he heard from 100 of his constituents, everyday people, pickleball players, dentists, stay-at-home parents, everyday people, he reached out to me and he said, Ben, help me fix this. We need to change that bill. If it's not doing what we intended to protect Utah's water, we will change it. It's not going to take a state initiative. If we can get our elected officials to do their job, they will change the law in ways that protect us, right? So let's try to rehabilitate and not assume bad intentions. On the other hand, if they aren't listening, then we get organized and make sure that they do. And I'm not running for governor.
Hi, my name's Danette McGilvery. I know that you've talked a lot about the referendum. Could you just give this group a quick summary of what the referendum is, what it will mean if it passes, and maybe a little bit more specifics about how people can get involved, but more just a good summary of the referendum and what you're trying to accomplish?
We're trying to accomplish undoing the vote that just took place with the commissioners. So if the referendum passes, there was no vote. And we go back to square one. And hopefully we can renegotiate some of the taxing and stuff if we can't get rid of Stratos altogether, which would be my hope. True. Only registered voters in Box Elder County can sign. That doesn't mean you can't come out and gather signatures for us. So there again, the table with the volunteers are right over there.
My name's Julie Quinlan, and I've been talking to some farmers in the area. And one thing that we don't mention is that this land where they want to put the data center is like the perfect winter range. They don't need to buy hay. They don't need to they might have to add water for their cattle, but they don't have to do anything. They just run their cattle out there. It's perfect land. And so that's one thing that we're not hearing from is the farmers themselves. But the second thing is, because the land is not zoned, the farmers feel intimidated because people are building houses and then complaining about the cattle or the feedlot or whatever. And a lot of the farmers that want to sell, they're looking at land up in Idaho because they are not protected by good zoning. No zoning means people can just come in and build a house and then they'll complain. So we need to protect our farmers.
Sorry. Ben, you had mentioned something about how China, I can't remember, what'd you say about the 60% thing?
That China's, most of their server capacity is being unused. It's just sitting there idle.
Okay, because it sounds like this whole data center, what Kevin O'Leary is pushing, it's like this race against China. We got to get there first. Doesn't sound like maybe really that's the biggest thing, or what would you say? Like, why do you think they're really pushing this so quickly?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Has anybody heard of the Mythos project? Any AI enthusiasts? Yeah, so what? A couple hands. There was a big leap forward in how these AI models are working just a few months ago, right? And it's called the Mythos Project. It sounds spooky. It's no wonder why people don't like AI, right? Everything sounds bad about it. But this Mythos Project, it actually is very helpful because it allows the US and other countries to identify security vulnerabilities in computers. Right? It's not replacing jobs, but it allows us to dig in and say, hey, somebody might hack our email account using this vulnerability. That leap forward didn't happen because we had the biggest data center. It happened because we had independent research groups, private businesses and public research institutions working together saying, how can we use this new technology? So we are not currently constrained at a global scale by our data center capacity. That's not what is keeping us from being able to invent new things, right? It's great that we can now get a body scan or an MRI and identify, analyze that better. That's coming from AI. I actually think it's great to be able to search things and learn things. This Stratos project is not about that, right? It's about something other completely. So it isn't the server capacity that's stopping us right now.
Yes, my name is Chad Russell, and I live in Weber County. I'm a little bit confused. I thought earlier in the discussion that MIDA, created by the Utah legislature apparently, is all powerful. And on the other hand, I'm hearing you have a referendum by the citizens of Box Elder County. Let's assume for a minute that referendum is passed overwhelmingly. I don't know how you reconcile those two perspectives.
Yep.
It's called the Utah Constitution. The right to do a referendum is set forth in the Utah Constitution for exactly this moment. This is a moment when citizens feel that a government entity has overstepped its power and we want a do-over. The referendum is a legal do-over or rewind of that decision. I'm not a lawyer, but that's my understanding.
Just going to say, MIDA also said that the county commissioners had to agree. So if we don't agree, and that vote never took place and was in the negative, we don't agree.
What I'd say is there's some legal ambiguity. Piper gave us the view. Some readings of how the statute's written is that the county could say no, and that would be the end of it. Other interpretations, including from some MIDA board members, are even if the county said no, they could still move forward with it. And so that's why I think we're hearing multiple issues. Once a project is approved, I think there's agreement that MIDA is able to do a lot with their land use authority. So that's a more of a constitutional question.
Hi, my name's Kayla Cannon. I'm currently living in Salt Lake City area. I'm from American Fork, born and raised there. This would affect people that far away and further. my main question and concern is that we have a Governor Cox, spreading information saying that we need to compete with China with their AI capabilities. China has around 350 or so AI data centers. In America, we have around 3,000 with over 1,000, closer to 1,500 under construction or proposed. If we have that many more surveillance centers than China, and we still believe the lie that we need to compete with them, we don't just have a transparency problem, we also have an efficiency problem. And I'm curious how we plan to avoid that if we are going to just allow this project to go through.
From a systems standpoint, you want to ask yourself, what do these things actually do? What do we need them for? What are they built for, and what are they optimized for? They're not built and optimized for MRI scans. They're not built and optimized for making sort of our lives better. They're built and optimized for generating profit for the companies who do AI. That's what they're built and optimized for. So the notion here, as I understand it, is that the developers of this project don't even have committed customers. They're assuming that they're going to have them in the form of Apple and Google and the big data companies. This narrative that we have to beat China, I think it feels very much like a used, and apologies to used car salesmen if you're here. I bought used cars. I love you guys. But it feels like that high pressure sales job, right? And it feels like somebody's whispering this into our elected officials' ears. The company that's trying to build this isn't trying to, from a systems perspective, and I think this is all obvious, the company that's trying to build this isn't trying to beat China. They're not trying to get a better diagnosis for cancer or for diseases or any of that sort of thing. They're trying to make money for their investors. That's it. So this emergence is one reason to take note. And just a quick anecdote. I used to fly airplanes as a young man. I don't much anymore, but this was true when I learned to fly, and it's true for airline pilots to a high degree. I have a number of friends who are airline pilots. They're highly trained in emergencies not to respond too quickly. It's to take a beat and assess what is happening. Because in lots of simulations and in lots of training, you find out that if you act quickly in an emergency situation, you can actually make things worse. So in this point, taking it back down to this thing, this high pressure sales job, to me says, this is not really an emergency. We're not all going to be speaking Mandarin next week if we don't okay this thing right now. In a real emergency, actual due diligence, especially when consequences are huge, is to take a beat and assess. And I think that's mostly what is being suggested by the people who are just saying, let's hang on a second. And I want to make one more point. This data center has gotten a lot of attention, I assume because it's being plopped down in the middle of a Great Salt Lake Basin that's already in crisis. But there are a couple of other data centers of similar scale proposed for Millard County that certainly need the same amount of scrutiny and are not getting that scrutiny right now. And so in a sense, I feel like this has been, as you said, something of a gift. It's showing us what Rhonda's family has seen for a long time. This is rolling and this is rolling and nobody seems to be noticing. We can say that for a lot more than just the Great Salt Lake. And, you know, this sort of Cold War analogy that has been rolled out, and it's kind of an interesting analogy for us here in Utah, because in Utah we have an interesting relationship to the Cold War in the form of downwinders and lots of things that were done that probably would have been best not done under the threat of emergency. And if we fast forward from the nuclear detonations that took place in Nevada and the downwinders that here in Utah that suffered those effects and are still suffering them. There was another case, of course, in the 1980s with the MX project that was being pushed as a big emergency in the Cold War. And Utah came together and said, you know what, we're going to take a pass on that. And that worked out just fine. That was the right answer at the time. And so this notion of just taking a beat and moving away from this I was accused of being a fearmonger by, I got a little bit of hate mail for my analysis, but it was Utah hate mail, which is kind of more like disapproval. Nobody threatened my life. They were just kind of threatening my own sort of self-worth, I guess. So I got a little bit of criticism for being a fearmonger, but trying to figure out how to communicate the scale and using atomic bombs. But I actually think that was the right choice because I've used lots of different analogies and that one seems to have gotten the attention. So that's what you want, get some attention. So we have this kind of experience in Utah with this, and I would say the fear-mongering is this notion that, oh, we've got to do this right now because for whatever reason, we've got to beat China or something like that. There's no reason. We wouldn't build a gas station this fast, much less something of this scale. And any of you have tried to build a gas station somewhere where nobody wants it, you know what I mean, right? Okay.
Thank you so much. We're at that time of the evening where we need to wrap up. I'm sorry, I know we have a lot of questions. Maybe one thing we can do quickly before we close, let's just do a quick popcorn round where you can yell out your questions, and then I'll let the panelists leave you with some final comments and respond to any of those questions that they want to respond to. Just yell them out. Health effects. Said health effects. EMF radiation. Did you say cloud seeding? Yeah, does cloud seeding have anything to do with weather, temperature changes? Great. So I want to.
The other thing is that pro that are very long. Like if you like it's long. Like that like first.
Yeah, how do the tax breaks work? There was one more over here. How many signatures needed for the referendum? So I want to let the panelists leave us with a final comment each. Feel free to respond to any of those questions. And then I'm sorry we have to wrap it up, but continue the conversation, everybody. And of course, keep the questions coming.
Well, I don't know whether to, that was thank you for all of those questions. I really do, to Rhonda's comment at the beginning, I feel a lot of hope about this. And I know that it's a scary time. And I live in Provo, Utah. And just a few years ago, we had one of these mega projects proposed in our backyard. This company wanted to build the world's largest artificial islands out on Utah Lake and then put 500,000 people out there. Right? And what we were told was, you are too late. The decision's already been made. We changed the law. Commitments had been made. And it felt terrifying. And we started to work. We started to talk about it. We got organized just like what Brenna is leading today. And when we thought we were losing, so I got sued personally for $3 million for asking questions about the project. And we thought that we were losing, right? They've got all the legal might. They've got all the money. They claimed that they had billions of dollars of investments. But actually, that was the turning point. They showed who they really were. And we've already seen Kevin O'Leary specifically tell us who he really is. He does not care about people. I'm with Rob on this. He cares about profit. I don't know if he's ever even been to Hansel Valley. I don't know if he's ever, we know he's gone to Salt Lake City at least. We've seen a picture of that now. But this is not somebody who's an advocate for our community. But I know that he also does not have the power. As much money as he has, as many connections as he has, it is us who decides what happens to our community, right? And so I think we're going to have a good outcome. Thank you. I'm so grateful for all of you being here. And we'll try to respond to your questions, those ones that were listed. Sign up for Grow the Flow, and we'll send that out after.
I think it's important for us to remember that if something is not mathematically or scientifically possible, we have every right to question what they're saying. And the numbers don't compute. So we need to remember that as people, we are the ultimate control in our government. That's the kind of government we have, and we need to exercise it.
So I heard so many good questions. Why, how, what, just so many good questions. That's the issue, right? That is the issue. We have so many unanswered questions. And I just want to leave with something really special happened with this. I mean, it was an inflection point. I've never seen anything like this, or never thought necessarily I would see anything like all of the people across every political view, from ultra-conservative to very liberal, all together on this issue. And it feels like it has been an attack on our home, and we are drawing a line in the sand to defend our home. So
I think what has struck me is that getting to know the folks from the Box Elder Accountability Referendum, hearing their stories of not only neighbors from the community reaching out, but people all over the country contacting them saying, I see myself in your story. A data center has tried to come into my community. The process didn't feel fair. What can I do? There's national attention on Box Elder County right now because you guys are doing something truly extraordinary. The amount of organizing that is happening on so instantly has truly blown not only organizations around the state away, but people all over the United States. And so that's why I think that if we're able to pull this off, this referendum, there is going to be a groundswell of support and eyes on our electeds and unelecteds who often make decisions to follow through and to listen to the people of Box Elder. So I remain optimistic because of what I'm seeing is happening here.
To the woman who was asking why aren't a number of things being talked about, that data centers are careful and that the elected officials are having security, and that's right. I think actually that is being talked about. I've heard that talked about a lot, the elected officials, and I'm with Ben, and I think everyone up here is this is not a part of the process, physical threats. I will say that I certainly don't agree with that, but I was at that meeting a few weeks ago, a month ago, and I've never seen what I viewed as elected officials disrespect the population more than I saw in that meeting. So the anger is understandable, but what we do with that anger, I agree, is absolutely critical. I have had high school students writing me from all over the country interested in this. I have had O'Leary has a similar project in Alberta, in Canada. The Cree Nation, First Nations people in Canada are fighting it. I've had their lawyers asking me for similar analyses. People in California, some people in Ohio. So I agree with what Piper just said. What's happening here in Box Elder County, this small rural county, and I mean large land, but small population in Utah, is really punching above its weight in having an effect, not just for helping us try to right this ship in this process, but also other people as well. And so I want to just, and I think it's starting to open. Here's what I've seen. Nobody's talking about this is how much tax revenue we're going to get, even though I agree it's greatly diminished from what maybe it, well, certainly should be if it went forward. Nobody's talking about the jobs that I've seen. Nobody's talking about the revenue. Everyone's talking about the land, about the place, about the natural treasure that's here, that this project seeks to mine and turn that natural treasure that kind of belongs to all of us, the people who live here, into financial treasure for people who don't live here. It reminds me of something, and I'll close with this, that my friend Darren says, and I teach in my classes every time, and it just resonates with me so strongly, and it's what I see now, it's what I feel, which is that someday, Darren, you said your grandmother told you this, the people will remember that the earth is not resource, the earth is relationship. And this relationship to this place, this iconic relationship to the Great Salt Lake and this place, I think, is bringing that into very stark relief. And I think it's going to be inspirational for people, not just here, but all over.
Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Sign up for Grow the Flow, sign up to volunteer for Bear. Have a great evening.